Most advice for men today skips the most important question. You're told to build habits, to wake up at 5 a.m., to grind harder, to be stoic, be high value. But here's the problem. You don't stabilize a collapsing bridge by shouting at it to be stronger. You don't stabilize a skyscraper by telling it to believe in itself. In engineering, when a system becomes unstable, you don't start with motivation. You start with architecture. You add damping so it can absorb shocks. You add constraints so it can't drift into dangerous states. You add feedback loops so it can correct itself in real time. You increase load capacity so that it can carry more without failing. This video is about that toolkit. It's not how to act more masculine, but how to design the system that keeps you stable under real world load. Before we go deeper, I want to clarify something. In the first video, we talked about masculinity as a system. We had inputs, processing, outputs, environment, constraints, and failure modes. We did not try to define what a real man is. We focused on something more fundamental. What is failing inside you? Under what load does it fail? What proves it's failing? Because identity, it's not the input. Identity is the output of the system that either holds under load or it collapses. Most spaces that talk about masculinity don't teach system design. What they teach is performance. Act confident. Don't show emotion. Just work harder. Do this routine. Follow this protocol. Buy this program. But if your architecture is unstable, then none of those strategies are going to work. That will all become temporary patches. You hold it together for a week, then one argument, one setback, one rejection, and the entire structure falls back to old patterns. Every engineer understands this. Behavior is a lagging indicator of architecture. So in this video, we're going to do something different. We are going to borrow the actual tools engineers use to stabilize systems: damping, constraints, feedback loop, and load capacity. And we're going to translate them into practical human terms. So something that by the end of this video, you should understand why some men can stay calm, clear, and grounded under pressure, not because they're naturally masculine, but because their internal architecture is quietly doing its job. Let's start with a real engineering example. Modern skyscrapers are very tall, slim, and very flexible. That's good for using less material, but it creates a problem: a wind. When wind hits a tall building, it doesn't just push once. It actually creates oscillations. They're swaying back and forth, back and forth. At a certain height, that sway becomes a serious issue, not because the building is about to snap in half, but because humans inside feel it. They get nauseous, anxious, and unsafe. Engineers had two options. We're going to make these buildings so stiff that they barely move, and that will lead to extremely expensive and inefficient construction project, or accept that it will move, but design how it will move. So they built something called a tuned mass damper. So imagine a huge heavy ball or block which is hung near the end of the building. When the building sways one way, the damper swings the other. So hydraulics and springs absorb this energy. The wind doesn't stop, the forces don't disappear, but the motion becomes controlled, smooth, and tolerable. The lesson is that stability isn't the absence of load. Stability is the ability to absorb the load without entering chaos. You don't see the tuned mass damper from the street. From outside, the building just looks stable. And that's how real masculinity works. The visible identity is just the building. The unseen damping system inside determines whether it stays calm under pressure or makes everyone inside sick. Now, let's translate this into human terms. We'll define 4 key subsystems: load capacity, damping, constraints, and feedback loops, and how they interact. Load capacity, how much you can carry before you bend. In engineering, every structure has a load rating. Below a certain force, it stays elastic, it bends and returns. But if you cross that limit, then it will yield, it will deform, it can crack or it can fail. For you, load is responsibilities, uncertainties, emotional stress, financial pressure, expectations from others. Load capacity is not how tough you think you are. It's the amount of real world complexity you can handle before you snap into shutdown, anger, avoidance, self-sabotage. In other words, how much life weight can you carry before you stop behaving like the man you want to be? Damping. How fast you return to baseline damping doesn't stop movement. It controls how fast the system comes down after it's disturbed. For men, damping includes how you breathe when you're stressed, how you process conflict after an argument, your sleep quality, how do you train your body, how do you talk to yourself after failures. Whether you have someone you can be honest with, high damping doesn't mean nothing ever bothers me. It means when you get triggered, you can come back quickly. When you feel angry, you don't stay stuck with it. When you feel fear, you can still move. Low damping means when you're staying angry for days over something very small, when you're replaying arguments for weeks, when your routines are collapsing. In other words, damping is your built-in way of absorbing emotional shock and returning to a stable operation. Number 3 are the constraints, the rules that prevent drift. In engineering, constraints limit degrees of freedom. They define what a system cannot do, so it doesn't wander into some dangerous state. For you, constraints are non-negotiable sleep window, no phone in bed, automatic savings or investment. I don't drink on weekends. I don't drink ever. I don't argue over text. I walk away before I raise my voice. Without constraints, you live in an open loop. Every option is available. Every temptation is accessible. Every environment can pull you off course. That feels like freedom, but functionality, it's drift. In other words, constraints are the simple, clear rules that keep you from becoming the worst version of yourself under load. Number 4, these are the feedback loops, sensors and corrections in any stable system. Sensors detect what's happening, controller decides what to do, and the actuator applies a correction. Example is a thermostat. It measures temperature, it compares it to a target, and then turns heating on or off. For you, feedback loops are journaling what actually happened, not what you felt. Tracking your behavior, sleep, training, spending, screen times, having honest conversations with people who tell you the truth. Weekly self-review. Where did I fail? Under what load? What's the pattern? Without feedback, you repeat the same failure mode for years and you call it my personality. In other words, feedback loops convert experience into adjustment instead of just regret. Notice something important. These 4 subsystems interact. Better damping increases your effective load capacity. Clear constraints can reduce the load you're actually experiencing. And the feedback loops tell you which constraint or damping mechanism to upgrade. Masculinity isn't just be confident. It's how your architecture can handle load, how quickly you can recover, what rules keep you from drifting, how you learn from your own data. Let's use 3-step diagnostic. What is failing? Under what load does it fail? And what proves the failure? But this time, what we want to do is we'll map it directly to damping, constraints, and feedback. So example number one, when you have weak damping, you're misdefining the problem as I'm just an angry guy. The correct definition should be what is failing? My damping system is insufficient. I spike emotionally and I stay elevated for too long. Under what load? Well, under moderate conflict with my partner or kids, I can't downregulate once I'm triggered. What are the evidence? In the last 5 arguments, I was still replaying them 24 hours later. My tone stays cold or distant the entire evening. My sleep is disrupted every time there is tension. Now, you're not a bad man. You are a system with low damping under relational load. Example number 2 is collapsing constraints. The misdefined problem is I have no discipline. The correction is really what is failing? My constraints are too complex or too weak to hold under a fatigue. Under what load? Well, when I'm tired after work and my phone is nearby, my rules collapse. Evidence? I scroll 2 to 3 hours at night, even on days I promised myself I wouldn't. My sleep schedule shifts 2 to 3 hours on weekends. My training routine falls apart whenever my day isn't perfect. Now, the problem isn't your character. It's poorly designed constraint in a high noise environment. Example number 3, there is no feedback loop. The misdefined problem can be described as I never learn, I always make the same mistakes. The correct definition can go, what is failing? Well, I have no structured feedback loop to analyze my behavior. Under what load? When I'm busy, I move from one problem to another without any review. And the evidence? Well, I don't write down what went wrong, ever. I avoid looking at my finances, my calendar, my messages. I rely on memory, which always tell me a vague story, not a clear pattern. Now, it's not I'm hopeless. It's I'm operating without any sensors. Once you define problems like this, the solutions stop being mystical. They become design decisions. Let's take a look at the personas we looked in the first video and show you how this toolkit can apply. The persona number 1, if you remember, was a directionless 25-year-old. The failure mode that person was experiencing was no architecture. The load were infinite choices, paralysis. The environment was the gig economy, the high social media noise. And there was a misdefinition of the problem. I'm not driven enough. From this first video, we redefined the problem as under open load conditions, I lack constraints, and decision frameworks. In other words, I have way too many choices and no clear rules to help me decide, so I stay stuck. The toolkit application is primary subsystems to fix. Constraints plus feedback loops. The concrete moves are reduce degrees of freedom. Choose one direction for the next 12 months, skill, career, lane, or a domain. Write a rule. For 1 year, I only say yes to opportunities aligned in this lane. And have a fixed starting time and an end time for focused work each weekday. One non-negotiable action per day towards that specific lane or course, or project or outreach. Install a feedback loop. Have weekly reviews. What did I actually do this week to move me forward in this lane? What didn't happen? Why? This doesn't magically give him a drive. It gives him rails. Drive tends to show up when the path is narrow and the signals are clear. Let's take a look at persona number 2, which was the overloaded 35-year-old father. The failure mode was a role overload, and the load was work plus family and financial stress. The environment was high cost of living, limited support. The problem was misdefined as I'm failing as a man, and we corrected it as under compound load, my emotional damping system is insufficient. In other words, there are too many responsibilities that hit me at the same time, and I don't have a good way to stay calm when pressure builds. The toolkit application is a primary subsystem to fix is damping plus load management. So concrete moves can be baseline damping rituals. You have 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of or end of each day that are non-negotiable. Breath work, short walk, shower, or quiet time without screens. Not as self-care, but as engineering. This is the hydraulic fluid of your nervous system. Then you can use load sequences. Don't stack the hardest conversations and tasks in the same window. Example can be no heavy financial conversations after 9 p.m. or when I'm already exhausted. Have micro feedbacks with a partner. Have a simple loop. Today, what felt heavy for you? What felt heavy for me? What can we remove or simplify tomorrow? He doesn't need to become more alpha. He needs to reduce simultaneous load and increase his ability to discharge stress daily. And we can have a persona number 3. That was the 22-year-old validation seeker, where the failure modes were external input dependencies, someone that's relying on social media comparison and dating app dynamics. The environments are a constant matrix, likes, follows, messages. And there was a misdefined problem where it says, I lack confidence. We corrected that by describing it as my feedback loop is external, not internal. It's creating unstable identity. In other words, I depend too much on what others think. So I don't really know who I am inside. The toolkit application one can use is feedback loops plus constraints on inputs. So concrete moves. Number 1, someone can constrain external signals, like remove followers, counts, and like counts from your home screen when possible. Time box a social media window, like 2 short windows per day. Build an internal performance loop. Track your behavior. Did I keep my word today? Did I avoid gossip? Did I train? Did I work on a skill that matters to me? And weekly identify and write down, when did I feel most like myself this week? What was I doing? Who was I with? Confidence stops being a mood in this case. It becomes a quiet knowledge. I consistently do what I said I would do, independent of what the algorithm said. Now, let's turn this into a simple engineering blueprint you can start applying. Design law number 1, reduce your degrees of freedom. Decide the few rules that actually matter right now. Man, partner, father, builder, student, whatever is true for you. For each role, define 1 or 2 non-negotiable behaviors. Less choices, more clarity. Design law number 2, install daily damping. Choose one practice that reliably calm your system. Walking, lifting, breathing, journaling. Treat it like a structural element, not a luxury. If your day is chaotic, but your damping ritual still happens, you are designing, you're not drifting. Design law number 3, make constraints that are simple and binary. Good constraints are easy to obey when tired. Example, no phone for the first 30 minutes after waking. In conflict, I don't yell. If I feel I might, then I step away and I come back. If your rules require willpower or negotiation, then they will fail under load. Design law number 4, build a weekly feedback loop. Once a week, ask yourself 3 questions, for example. Where did I fail this week? Under what load did I fail? And what small constraints or damping adjustment would reduce that failure next time? You're not judging yourself. You are running an engineering change order on your own life. Design law number 5, use progressive overload, not heroic bursts. Don't try to fix your life in a weekend. Increase the load the way you would go in a gym. Take it gradual with some sort of recovery. Take one domain, fitness, finance, relationships, craft, and increase the difficulties incrementally. In other words, you're not building a movie montage. You're building a stable system that can carry real weight for decades to come. Let's return to the skyscraper. From outside, you see glass, steel, and a clean skyline. You don't see the tuned damper inside. You don't see the sensors, the control systems that are quietly working. But that's what keeps the whole thing livable and stable when the winds pick up. Masculinity works the same way. From the outside, people see confidence, steadiness, presence, strength. But what actually matters is how you handle load, how quickly you return to baseline. Which constraints protect you from your own worst impulses? Which feedback loops keep you learning instead of repeating the same failures? In the first video, we focused on defining the problem. What is failing, under what load, with what evidence? In this video, we build the toolkit: damping, constraints, feedback loops, and load capacity. And in the next video, we'll turn this into a concrete daily blueprint: how to structure your day, how to design your week, how to set boundaries, and how to turn this architecture into routines that actually live in your calendar and your body. Not performative masculinity, but a system that works under real world conditions. If this helps you think more clearly, consider subscribing. Not because you need another label, but because you are in the middle of engineering the man you are becoming. And this series is simply one more tool on your workbench. Thank you for your attention, and until next time.